Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Waumsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast. This is episode number, wait for it, 200, entitled To Niche or Not to Niche. It was published on Thursday the 8th of October 2020. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and a few bits of housekeeping just before we begin. Head over to wpbuilds.com, the website where we maintain all of our stuff. There's a few pages over there that I'd specifically like you to look at. Head over to the subscribe link at the top, that's wpbuilds.com/subscribe, and over there you'll be able to keep in touch with all that we produce on WP Builds. Each week we produce a podcast, that's what you're listening to now, and we also do a news item on Monday where I go through the previous week's WordPress news. That comes out at 7 a.m. UK time. You can subscribe for both of those things on the form on that page, but also you can subscribe to a deals email and I'll alert you when I hear about WordPress related deals. There's also links on there to our Facebook group and various other things like how to subscribe to us on your favourite podcast player. Head over to wpbuilds.com/deals if you'd like to avail yourself of significant amounts off WordPress products and services. There's absolutely loads on there with significant amounts off, so if you're in the market for something this week, check that out. Also, I would like to say wpbuilds.com/advertise if you would like to have your product or service in front of a wider WordPress audience, a bit like A/B split test. Do you want to set up your A/B split tests in record time, like in a couple of minutes? Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part is that it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. You can check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Now, if everything has worked correctly, this episode should be being published on Thursday during the Page Builder Summit. If you haven't checked it out, it's still going on. Well, today, the remainder of today and tomorrow, Friday, go to summit.camp and you'll be able to take part in those presentations. And if you missed any, you can always buy we're calling it the Power Pack. It's the All Access Pass. So you get access to all the materials. That's over at summit.camp. Obviously, I've recorded this prior to that being live, and I'm hoping, I've got every finger and toe crossed, hoping it's going to be a nice event. I would just like to make a personal thanks this time around, as we've reached episode 200. I'd like to make a personal thanks to David Waumsley. David joins me every other week and he's been doing so for many, many years now. We're heading into our 4th year at WP Builds and I don't think I've ever thanked him personally, so I'm doing it now. David, thank you so much for the effort that you've put into this podcast over the years. I've really appreciated it, and as we both know, there's a fair bit of work involved and I appreciate everything that you do. Speaking of which, today it is an episode with David. It's called To Niche or Not to Niche, and it's exactly that. Are we better off as WordPress website builders finding a niche? Are there benefits to that? Or are we better off just being more generic? A surprising amount pops into this conversation, certainly more than I was anticipating, and it's really fun. We debate it from both sides, and I hope that you enjoy it.
Hello, today's discussion or debate is to niche or not to niche. So, Nathan, we've talked about this some years back, but we haven't subjected it to this kind of perhaps more rounded format. Do you think you've changed actually on niching since we talked about it?
I don't really know. I mean, certainly from a sort of philosophical perspective, I might have changed in that I might have a more rounded opinion of it, but certainly the work that I do hasn't changed. You know, I haven't managed to succeed at being a niche, if you like. It's probably quite apropos to say right at the start that the United Kingdom people say the word niche, and by niche we mean niche. Is that how they say it elsewhere? Niche?
I think so. It seems the American way of saying it for certain. They've got it wrong, though. It's niche.
Yeah, there's another debate right there, but not a debate we're going to have. So, yeah, okay, tell us about what's in this debate then, and what to niche or not to niche. That is the question.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna put forward the niching argument because I think maybe to a certain extent I've thought about it more, because I think when we last talked about it, we were kind of like, well, we don't really do it. So I think things have moved on. So I'm going to argue, Well, I would say, I don't know, do you think this is right, that this is the kind of default advice for most people who, say, run courses and events for people getting into our business? I think most of them suggest that you ought to look into a niche. Do you think that's true?
Yes, and I'm always puzzled by that, because obviously I'm going to be taking this from the opposing side, in other words, not niching. And I'm never quite happy with that advice. It always seems to sit ill with me, because that's just not the experience that I've had. I mean, I'm not living in a metropolis. The geography and the geographical constraints of where I live play a huge part of the work that I do. You know, if I lived in the middle of London or something, my client base is suddenly colossally, dramatically improved. So that's just not the experience I've got. And obviously, again, if I was living in the middle of London, I would be available to thousands of different people, all doing the exact same work. So vets or lawyers or restaurateurs or whatever it might be. But where I live, that's just not the case. So I can't be that choosy, because I do like to work with local people. So sometimes I look at this advice and think, well, that's great if you live in a situation where that might work out for you. Especially if, like me, you like to go and see the clients. But to some extent, I think that people selling this message that you need to find a niche and go drill down on that niche, what else could you say? If you're selling a course about selling websites, you can't really tell everybody, well, don't niche on anything, just try and find any work from anybody, because that'll be fine. Because you can't really sell a course about that, because you can't constrain it and you can't develop the techniques, because there isn't really a technique. It's just it's more broad and wide. So I reject to some extent that advice.
Yeah, I mean, it's this kind of some semantics to this as well, isn't it? Because you could argue that you perhaps have niched, you just niched into your kind of local area with the type of people that you will serve, and in that way,
that's true.
What you offer. Yeah. So maybe, I mean, okay, what I'll do is I'll probably try and put forward the bullet points of the, if you like, the default advice for it. So I'll quickly run through my notes and then we can discuss it more. So the first point is that it might help you find your ideal customer. It could help you to become an expert in your field, and as such, you might be able to charge more because you are that expert. It might be a better way to target your marketing, reduce some of the burnout or overwhelm that you can get, because it's easier to create systems if you're doing the same type of work. The other kind of thing is that you, instead of competing with everybody with the same sort of skill set, you could work with other people who work in that niche alongside it. So that would help also with your marketing as well, to make connections with other people who sell services to your same niche. So I think they're basically the main points, aren't they? And there are a few extras that actually you helped me with.
Do you want to mention those now?
Yeah, I'll just throw them in at the end. One of them was that, if you do go down a niche, there's nothing to stop you going and creating another niche. Once you've worked out the format of a niche, then you could probably do that. And also that, you could literally sell that niche and move on to the next one if you wanted. So there's a lot, they're really the plus points for niching.
Yeah, the sort of objections I get, I think, the first one that you mentioned, finding the ideal customer. I don't even know what that is, really. In that, isn't the ideal customer just somebody who gives you all the resources that you need when you need them, and pays on time, and is ridiculously polite and always answers your emails, etc.? I see that as the ideal customer, not somebody that is a vet or somebody that's I don't know, looks after businesses, is a marketer or does law or whatever it might be. I just don't see those as my ideal customer. The ideal customer is just somebody that behaves well and allows me to get on with what I need to do, not somebody who works in a particular industry.
Okay, well, maybe, one of the things that we might do to our clients is ask them about who is their intended visitor. So there's still something in the advice maybe about the fact that, perhaps you should be asking yourself who you'd want to work with. And there might be a great variation if certain people in certain types of industry might be a certain type of person against another. I don't know. I'm sure there's something very different about authors against somebody who's in waste disposal or something, you know.
Yeah, yes,
the type of customer you're going to get. So you might want to do that. I mean, who do you imagine your personality is going to click best with?
Yes, well, if that was the case, you know, definitely second-hand car salesman. I'm going to go straight into that niche because I'm just going to click with them readily, and everything's going to be fine. No, but it's an interesting point, you know, the idea that the business that you go after is your ideal customer, and obviously that is built upon you buying into the whole niche thing. And obviously, if you do buy into the whole niche thing, and let's just for the sake of argument, let's say it's vets. And you've decided that, you know, you have enough interest in that from the community. There's people that need vets websites. You feel that can make a business which is profitable. Then, yeah, there's just nothing wrong with that. They are your ideal customer. They are the vets or the people that work in vets practices who have control of the purse strings and the marketing budget or what have you. But like I say, that's just not the experience I've got. The geography and the constraints of the geography mean that I tend to work more locally, and I just work happily with anybody. So the niche is geography rather than you know the industry you're in. So that's interesting. But I can see the point. Yeah, I can see that there is a point there. It just hasn't worked out that way for me for reasons unknown.
Yeah. What if it was if your niche, could you not adopt the niche that you're going for? So perhaps, you know, instead of being vets, it was generally kind of health of all kind. Then you would have a wider catchment area known for doing these types of site that were, you know, either health for animals, health for humans, yoga classes, that kind of thing, health and leisure kind of sites. You could still kind of build a niche even in a smaller area initially.
Yeah, it never, my business, there was no great plan to make it geographically constrained. It's just the way it worked. You know, if I was going back, and so probably I'm about to undermine everything I've just said. If I was going back, when I began designing websites, you know, things like Wi-Fi didn't exist. Certainly nobody had mobile phones. Computers were available, but certainly not everybody had one. It was the kind of thing that certain people had and other people didn't. And people slowly started to adopt websites as a thing that they needed. And I was just able to talk to these people, and they were confronting me in the real world. You know, I actually met them and spoke about it. So that's just the way it evolved. But now, you're quite right. The world is your kind of oyster. There's no reason that geography should block you. Because every vet, well, let's say in the UK, in our case, it might be better to constrain yourself with that kind of geography, but every vet in the UK is potentially your customer. And I could totally concede that. You know, there's just nothing wrong with that argument. It's just not the way my business evolved, but my business didn't evolve with a grand plan. It just happened that way. I would say one thing, though, that with your niche, do you feel that finding your ideal customer is something that you yourself need to be into? So again, taking the example of vets, is that something that you need to be passionate about? In other words, if you're constantly building vet websites, would that just get a little bit boring and a little bit uninteresting if the challenge was always to create a new and innovative vet website, which basically said the same thing as every other website? Now, that might be great because it's easier and you've got the expertise and you know instinctively that you can give this advice to the client and it's solid advice. That's what you need. That's what countless websites have told me. You need to put this information at the top. Yeah, great, but boring maybe?
Yeah, I think, well, again, I think the niche or not the niche comes down to this balance between kind of not being overwhelmed by trying to learn too much more than one person could possibly do against, you know, the danger of getting too boring if you just, you know, limit yourself to a certain thing that you do. But maybe is there not, you could argue that even if you're just picking sites that you make for one industry, it will never get boring because, you know, how you might represent that information on the web itself, technology changing, how you can put over your message is constantly evolving. So you'd probably still be quite excited, even if you were quite bored of the subject matter.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, we're not really dealing with the subject matter so much. We're dealing with more the technical stuff and, you know, new ways of doing things, new plugins, new versions of WordPress, new editors, page builders or whatever. So the interest could still be there, even though you're deploying the same kind of site. You might be better off niching, because the fun in this job isn't necessarily about the messaging. It's often about the technology, and that never stands still.
Yeah, I think one of the arguments for the good reason why they will argue for niching or looking at it is because it does get you back to some of the business propositions. Like I was saying, ideal customer, we ask that when we talk about web design of our clients, about who's the visitor that they're trying to attract. And also we might be looking into the type of traffic we might attract for our clients as well. And when you think about niching, although maybe cynical, you can start from the basis of saying, well, what are people searching for out there, and actually do the kind of keyword research first before you even pick your niche, which means that to a certain degree, you might be able to predict the likelihood of success in your business.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Just on that point, do you get a nice, rounded, fruitful answer when you ask your clients who their ideal customer is? Do they give you a reasonable pitch on that, or do you find that it's anybody that needs a vet, anybody that needs a lawyer? Do they have that information? Because I know we obsess about it all the time, but kind of every time I have that conversation with somebody, they generally just say the most generic thing imaginable, and we have to begin that journey about identifying who their ideal customer is.
Yeah. I mean, I think just that's human nature, I think, isn't it? We don't like to kind of think about these things. And even if you're trying to niche, I think through keyword research, you haven't decided what you're going to specialize in. I'm not sure that I've tried to do this before a little bit, looking at keywords to see what people might type for our kind of services. And the results are not really very conclusive. So, I've just argued my own case. I've argued against my own case, haven't I? Here,
yeah, that's fine. I think we'll be doing that throughout this. And is that the point about it though? Is that basically niching is just it's a study in SEO. It's just trying to manipulate the search engines so that you make your life easier. So in my case, Mr. Generic will take anybody kind of client. That's very hard to pitch. How on earth am I going to differentiate myself in a keyword search? But I do wonder. I wonder if the keyword, and I have literally no insight into this, I'm just putting it out there. I wonder if people in my geographical area are searching for web designer or web builder and then the name of the town. So it might be, in my case, web designer Scarborough, or it might be web designer London, or whatever. Is that what's happening? Or are people literally typing in things like veterinary practitioner, web designer, lawyer, web builder, whatever? In other words, does it actually help you in the SEO game? I honestly don't know, but I know for my part that I would be searching against geography, but that's probably not what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. And there's a couple of examples, a couple of people I remember from some groups who have had very successful niche businesses, because they are typical businesses that you would expect to do quite well. So somebody's making websites for churches, and another one, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, is making for what North Americans would call municipal areas, so like our town council websites, and you can see why both of these would be successful, because they could carry on through word of mouth, because there's no competitiveness there. If you need a website for your local town council, you're probably going to look at what other town councils have got. You're not in competition with those people. You probably want the same kind of thing and inspiration, so you're likely to easily go for somebody who's done the same site as your neighbor. And I think churches are the same. There's no commercial downside to this. They're treating their local people. So I think those kind of niches are worth. I don't know whether people will actually search SEO for those things. My suspicion is that there's much more searches for DIY anyway, and that's where I think the church niche has done quite well, because they've also created a SaaS platform or WAS platform.
Yeah, I really love that argument, because I think that is a really strong proposition, especially when geography comes into play, for not niching. So an example would be, I build a website for a lawyer, and the lawyer, my friend the lawyer, is then quite happy to recommend me to the garden centre because there's just no competition there. And the garden centre will recommend me to, the veterinary practice, and the veterinary practice will recommend me to the doctor, and the doctor will recommend me to the startup who's got a new business selling widgets. And so this whole word of mouth geography thing works really well because there's just no competing thing. Whereas if I'm Mr. Lawyer, and again, this is constrained by geography, this whole argument rests upon that premise. You're not going to recommend me. If you feel I've done a good job and I've made your website superior to all of your rivals in the local area, you're just not going to recommend me because that's just not in your interests. You're then going to boost the SEO, if you like, or the availability or the desirability of your website, and therefore increase competition for yourself. So that's not something you're going to do. Now, I don't know if lawyers gather online in forums and recommend web building services to people who live in far-flung different parts of the country. My estimation is that lawyers are in competition with all lawyers in the country. Increasingly, it doesn't matter. Some relatives of ours just recently moved, and they moved from a part of the UK called Suffolk up to where I live, which is Yorkshire. And they elected to use a lawyer, because you must have lawyers to fill out the paperwork and so on. And the lawyer had no geographical location in Suffolk or Yorkshire. They just picked somebody who was far away, and I think it was basically based upon price or something like that. And so that's what they did. So I think that the competition thing is really important. And so that also, highlighting what you just said, there must be certain niches where, let's say, philanthropic things or municipality things, like you said. So schools might be a really good niche because I know for a fact that there's no competition there. And I know that head teachers, often meet up with other head teachers to share best education practice. That would be a great example. And local town councils, exactly like you said, they meet up to share best practices, something innovative that they've seen elsewhere. So that would work really well, that niche. But it strikes me that if you're in a competitive niche, you've got to deal with the competition and the difficulty of them recommending you via word of mouth. So SEO is the only tool you've got. I don't know if I've explained my thoughts on that very clearly, but hopefully I did.
Yeah, no, I understood it. I mean, I've always felt that was my biggest argument against the niching was this idea, obviously the limits, the people you can reach within it because people go local, but also mainly the fact that competitors wouldn't want to recommend you to them. But there are, the vets one is an example because we have a vets site that we look after, and they've been sold a couple of things which I've needed to embed in their site by people who are niching in there. So one of them, I can't remember what the other one is, but the one I remember is this kind of website, if you like, that people can search through for different types of pet care that they want to know about. And they've been able to sell this to lots and lots of vets out there. So I'm assuming the vets, again, they are restricted by their locality. So they're not worried about the fact that they've got basically a page which is the same as many other vets out there because their customers are just the vets. They're just serving the people locally.
It's really interesting, actually. There are certain people who seem to be immune from the need to update their website just because the geography is so crucial and there may be just so few choices. And vets seems like a really perfect example. You are going to go to the nearest vet. I mean, I would imagine that there's not a lot. I mean, maybe the personality of the vet is crucial. I don't really know. I don't have any pets, so I'm talking, I'm just talking off the top of my head. But it strikes me that you're just going to go to the one that's closest because they're going to deliver the same thing. And goodness me, I mean, you see some shocking websites out there. And, there have been times in my life when I've actually done dreadful things like cold calling and emailing out saying, look, did you know that you didn't have an SSL certificate? This is crucially going to affect your search engine rankings. And most of the time they don't even reply, and sometimes they do. We're not interested in updating our website. It does everything that we need. It's online, and all people want to do is type in the name of the bit of the town that we live in and get our phone number. That's all the website's for.
Yeah. Do you know what? I remembered something that I was thinking long time ago, so I'm sure I haven't mentioned this. It's just reminded me of a little niche that I thought was out there, which I never explored. There were so many garages for cars that do MOTs in the UK. And apart from the big players out there, none of these small ones had a booking system at all. And I really, at one point, I was looking at it because I thought, I could probably go around all of these people and say, do you want adding to your site, or we'll create you a site with this appointment set up. But I never really trusted an appointment system enough to build a business on it. But I thought there was, at the time, this is a long time back, seemed to me a potential niche out there. All of these kind of small local businesses, it would have been so much easier if they didn't have to ring to book in their appointments and to get the reminders as well, sent out to their customers to get the repeat business.
Yeah. This brings me to what I think is my strongest point, is that it is just so easy to mess this up, to get it wrong. So in other words, to just entirely pick the wrong niche. You pick something which you really firmly believe, like in your case, MOT, we should say, is like something that you have to put your car through this test every year, and if it fails, it's not allowed to be on the road until it's retested and passed. So it's a pretty big thing for garages. MOT must represent a vast amount of their income because it's mandatory every year. But you could build your whole business on the misguided notion that car mechanics would like to have this automated, and a booking system would be superb for that. And you get your whole thing built up. You're really niching down on this, and then you start to reach out to them only to discover that, well, they're just not interested. I've got a pen and paper and a phone. It's worked for decades. What's wrong with that? And my feeling is that would be the response that you'd get from mechanics. They probably don't have that much interest in logging into a booking system. They probably want to talk to the people and ascertain over the phone what might be wrong with it or whatever. And so getting the niche wrong and having a calamity on your hands, I think, is totally and utterly possible.
Yeah, I think so. And there's two sides of this kind of niching, because on one hand, if you're thinking about just designing websites so they look a certain way for a certain niche, that's fine. But probably where the greatest need might be is in the functionality, like an appointment service there. And there again, unless you're a developer who creates your own, your business becomes dependent on somebody else's business, I'm agreeing with you there.
The other thing I was going to mention was what you just said there about a booking system. You didn't have the sort of confidence that you maybe had found a booking system which was reliable enough and what have you. And it's the, let's say that you've niched right down and you can replicate sites, and you can do it even with things like a WAS, website as a service, where you can replicate and clone sites with great ease. You could have all your eggs in one basket in terms of the tech stack, and then, I don't know, there's a vulnerability. There's a problem with a particular plugin. That plugin that you have got everybody's bookings in has gone bust. They're no longer supporting it. And, you're in a bit of bother there. Fixing that on one website, no problem. Maybe a dozen, no problem. Fixing it on the hundreds in your niche could be a real difficult proposition to get out of.
I just wonder, though, to some degree we are niching, whatever it is. I mean, we're both making pretty much solely WordPress sites. Even if you're kind of anti-niche, isn't there still an argument for at least going through all the potential options for niche, or at least trying to highlight something that you do that's different to what other people do? So whether it's the fact that you build with a page builder, which makes it a lot easier, in some, and maybe it's not what most people think of when they're talking about niches, because usually it's about looking for an industry, isn't it, that you're going to sell to. But isn't there still potentially a niche in the idea that you're the website builder who who uses page builders that makes it so much easier for you to edit your sites. Is that not a niche in some degree?
I think you're right. It is. It is exactly true that we are niche. All of us are niching to some extent. I think I've been taking the word niche to mean industry. So, like I said, vets, lawyers, and so on. But yeah, I imagine you wouldn't find a website builder out there, a web developer or what have you, who isn't trying to corral people into believing that they're the best at a particular thing. That goes without saying. I'm sure that you're right. I'm going to change the subject slightly, and that is, are you kind of restricting yourself in terms of the available market? If you go for, let's say, vets, you really are stopping the phone from ringing from anybody who's not a vet, unless you've got multiple niches happening, or you've got a niche as a side gig and you've got your regular website business. You've got your school niche website, you've got your vet niche website, and you've got your regular website. Suddenly it all seems like a house of cards or too many balls being juggled in the air at once. So there's a problem. You are literally stopping the phone from ringing because I'm not a vet and I don't need you because you only build vet websites. And that's got to be bad, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who do a kind of niche as a side business and still keep generic over the top. And there's nothing to stop you, say, building up a whole bunch of those. I mean, I do think in this day and age of DIY, there may be something in setting up some kind of niche so you can build your own, I don't know, lawyer website or vet website or something like that, knowing the fact that most people who do DIY, it's not as easy as they think it is. So you could set up your WAS solution and still be there to add on custom services. So I think I think maybe we're moving a little bit towards that idea, as people do seem to think they want to build their own websites now. You could niche in that, but still, if you like, offer over the top of that your customized services, and you could present lots of different niches. But again, there's a lot of work there, or is there? Because it was something I was considering, the idea that once you build up a bunch of sites, many of those sites could be made into something else. So let's say you decided that you were going to do sites for electricians. Probably the kind of layout and the things that people might need on a site for an electrician are going to be pretty much the same as the one for a plumber, maybe even for a mechanic. So you could, set up multiple identities, couldn't you, as niches?
Yeah, I think that's just too much of a headache for me. Every time the phone rang, you would be trying to figure out, what am I saying? Which phone's ringing? I mean, just as an example, there's no way I'm getting 3 or 4 phone numbers. I just want one phone number to ring, in which case then when they phone up and start talking about, you pray that they start talking about mechanics or veterinary practices, because then you're off, okay, right, I know what they're on about now, as opposed to launching into a conversation about why you're the best for school websites. I'm not a school, I'm a mechanic. Oh, sorry, wrong business. So yeah, that just seems like too much effort to me. Just interestingly, do you actually know anybody who's done the niche thing? And I mean, I don't mean know as in personally know. Can you think? Let's not name any names, but can you think of anybody who's done the strict niching and totally nailed it?
Not really. Only the 2 examples I knew with the church and the local town sites. They're the only 2 businesses I've known who've managed to nail it, and you can see why they've done that. I can't think of any example. There were some niches, but again, they were more WAS solutions. There was a couple of them which I think I talked about before, which were based on restaurants. They were just serving restaurants. Pubs is another one, isn't it? I've heard somebody said to me, and I've never seen anybody do it. If somebody said, if I was niching and I was in the UK, I would do pubs.
I don't know about that. That strikes me as, again, the geography. You're all in competition with each other, aren't you? Pub A over there is in competition with Pub B over there. It's fraught with difficulty. Do you know the other thing as well is we sort of touched on it at the beginning, and it's the inauthenticity of it a bit as well. You pick the niche. I don't even know how you how you decide what it is that you want to spend your life doing. I enjoy building websites, as most of us. We just sort of fell into it. But then if I decide to myself, right, I only want to do vets, it gets boring. We mentioned that, but it's just not going to feel authentic. Whenever I'm having these conversations, their problems are not my problems. I can't really engage with them. So that's another factor as well.
Yeah, but I think there is conversely the opposite argument. It would be an argument for niching is the fact that it can add authenticity to what you do. So you specialize in something. It would kind of imply, and it may be true. I'm sure the successful niches are people who actually wandered into it. They did a few sites that were in the same industry, and that grew from there. And I'm sure that's the case. As I was mentioning with the church and also the towns, I'm sure they were wandered into by accident because they were genuinely kind of interested in solving those kind of problems, and those problems would, they could solve them for other people as well.
Yeah.
So I think there's the other argument, there's the counter argument that niching could be, if it comes out of a natural progression, it could probably be one of the most authentic things you can do, isn't it?
I'm going to concede that completely, and I'm going to say that's the rich vein that you want to tap into. If you accidentally stumble into a niche which proves fertile ground, great, and good luck to you, and I'm really pleased for you. But maybe don't go looking for the niche because of all the things that we said during this podcast. It's going to be difficult to find. You're probably going to sound inauthentic. It might not be profitable. Geography could be at play. All these different things. Accidentally find it? Great. Going to look for it? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to find. I'm still trying to find a kind of niche in some. It's not maybe so much industry. My colleague, I think I may have mentioned this before. In a way, she started a web business back in 2000 with effectively a niche that genuinely came out of the job that she used to do before in tourism. So the kind of sites that she used to get were all connected to local tourism for the whole county, and she got lots of those. But again, she did fall foul of the other problem that big players came into those kind of markets. So, of course, now you would just go to hotels or bookings.com if you wanted accommodation. So they kind of disappeared.
I feel that we've probably done this subject. What do you think?
I think so. We will never do this one again.
No, we're not going to niche down on niches. So thank you. That was a nice little chat. What I would say is, if anybody's listening to this and does have a really strong opinion, you've done a niche and it totally worked out, please add some comments. Let us know what you think. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
But thanks for that, David.
Yes, thanks. But also, just to add to that, I'd be really keen, because I have seen some people who think they should find a niche, really struggling to find that niche. And if anybody's got any tips about how you might do that, that would also, I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's hope that somebody comments then. Thanks, David.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. As I said at the top of the show, episode 200. As always, a pleasure to speak to David Waumsley. Maybe that threw up some interest for you. Maybe you are super niche. Maybe you are super generic, a bit like me. Either way, there are definitely benefits, some surprising ones, and pitfalls. Again, some surprising ones. But I hope that you found that of interest. If you did, please leave some comments at the bottom of the post on wpbuilds.com. Alternatively, go to our Facebook group, wpbuilds.com/Facebook, where you can leave a comment as well when you find the thread. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by A/B Split Test. Do you want to set up your A/B split tests in record time? The new A/B Split Test plugin for WordPress will have you up and running in a couple of minutes. Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part, it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. You can check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Okay, we'll be back next Thursday for a podcast episode, Monday twice for the WP Builds weekly WordPress news, and the live version of the news where I'm joined by some notable WordPress guests. You can find that at wpbuilds.com/live or in our Facebook group. All that remains for me to do is to fade in some splendidly cheesy music and say, stay safe. Bye-bye for now.